My name is Jenny and I'm here in Lechlade Craft Barn in the Cotswolds. My colleague Karen has just skipped out the door and you might see her in the very near future in some tutorials that we're going to be putting online here for Lechlade Craft Barn. Today I'm going to make these Lavish fabric Christmas baubles with you. They're a really simple make, no sewing, no sticking, and they're great for using up scraps of fabric or personalising with a bit of fabric that might be very special to you. And you can also use them as a gift embellishment, not just for putting on your Christmas tree. They're really light to add to a Christmas gift bag. And again, you might want to use some fabric that's special to the recipient. It's a really, really simple make, I promise you. So I hope you're going to craft along with me. If you want to make one of these after you've seen the tutorial, the kits are available on the Creative Craft Show Live shop. They include everything you need to make the baubles. You have 3 baubles in the gift pack, a range of Christmas fabrics, lovely glittery ribbon, the pins, the tools, the template, the beads, and of course full instructions with lots of photos on. The only things you'll need: a pair of scissors, a craft knife and a pen. And I'm sure as crafters you've got all of those. So I'm just going to pop those to one side. And I have picked my complementary Christmas fabrics here. I'm just using 2 fabrics. You can use different fabrics on each panel if you really want to, but we like to use 2 fabrics one side, 2 fabrics the other side that complement each other. And that's what you'll get in the bauble pack if you order one of those. You will also get polystyrene balls, as I mentioned, your elastic band, which will become clear why we're using that in a minute, and also is useful for just sitting your polystyrene ball on the table, stop it rolling away. You've got your template, your finishing tool, and your pins and beads. So let's get started with the tutorial. So the first thing I'm going to do is take this elastic band and I'm popping it around the polystyrene ball. Now some of these have got a seam on that you can actually see all the way around, and you can pop your elastic band along that line. You want to get it as straight as you possibly can because that will affect where the fabric sits on your ball. So I've just popped that round, and then I'm taking my pen and I'm going to draw around the elastic band to create a line on my polystyrene ball. So as smooth as you can. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect, so don't stress too much about it, but we do want it as straight as we can. Saying that, I've just wobbled, looking up. And there we go, that's one side. Okay, so I'm going to pop the band off. And then I'm going to pop it back on 90 degrees to the way that I just put it, so that I'm going to draw round the other way around the ball. So again, just try and check that it's as straight as you can get it. We want that to give us even quarters on the ball for applying the fabric. So just taking my pen and I'm running that around the elastic band just to create that second line, dissecting the first one, which is at 90 degrees to the first line that we did. So you can see hopefully there, all the way around, I've got 2 lines. So the next thing I'm going to do is take my craft knife and I'm going to pop it in, and with quite a smooth sawing action, you want to cut around about 1 centimetre down into the ball. This is how we're going to apply the fabric onto the ball. We're going to push it into these grooves. So we want a nice, smooth, deep cut. And if you leave the blade in and keep sawing round, make it a bit longer, you get a much smoother cut than if you keep pulling it out. Otherwise this polystyrene does break up a little bit. So I'm following that line quite carefully, pushing my blade in round about 1 centimetre, and I want to go all the way around and join up with where I started. I'm just coming back round to the beginning. There we go. And I'm going to now repeat that the other way. So popping my knife in and a little bit of a sawing action, following a nice smooth line, using that pen as a guide and going all the way around my bauble. Okay. Say, if you try and leave that knife in, you don't get so many of the bits of polystyrene pulling out. There we go, that's all the way around, just popping my blade back on my knife to be safe. So I'm just going to put that bauble down on my elastic band so it doesn't roll away. Floors here in the craft barn are really old and uneven, so if you put anything round on the tables here, they immediately roll off in another direction. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare my fabric. So I've got 2 squares of fabric here, which are about 17 by 15 centimetres, and I need to turn them over so that the right side is down. And take my pen and take my template. So this template is included in our kit, and it's a shape, petal shape, that's slightly larger than a quarter of the ball. So if you're making your own or you want to make one in a different size, just push a piece of paper around the bauble and sort of roughly draw around it, but then try and draw a nice symmetrical, even petal shape. So I'm popping that down. I've got the long side of my fabric of that 15 by 17 centimetres, and I'm popping my template down. I'm just going to draw around it. Make sure you're drawing on the wrong side. Although, to be honest, it wouldn't really matter because we're going to hide the edges of the fabric pieces. And one more. There we go. I'm going to repeat that on my contrasting fabric. So I've picked a small holly print here in a red and cream to contrast with each other. And small prints or nice metallic or plain fabrics work best for these. If you have a really big pattern or print, because the baubles aren't huge, you won't really see very much of the pattern. And the size of the polystyrene balls that we're using here is 70 millimetres. As I say, you can do it with any size. So just taking my fabric scissors, and I'm going to cut out my petals. Get rid of the bits. And then I'm going to, when I've cut these, start applying these to my cut bauble. So I hope you're all enjoying this fabulous weekend of the Creative Craft Show live. Such a shame we can't all be together and chatting and meeting up, etc. But obviously these are peculiar and extraordinary times. And the advantage of these fabulous virtual events that ICHF have put together is that you can see everything from the comfort of your own home. Feet up on the sofa, cup of coffee, whatever, and enjoy it. And what a fantastic weekend is lined up as well. I know I'm going to be dipping into lots of the workshops and having a good old shop on the virtual event. I think it's absolutely fabulous. So here we are. I am just cutting my other 2 petals. There we go. And the sort of fabric that you want to use for this is just a standard sort of cotton, nice cotton. You can use a silky fabric, but it's a little bit more tricky to work with because it slides about. You'll see in a minute how that would be affected on the bauble. But you don't want to use anything too thick, so velvet, sort of heavy briquet, something like that wouldn't really work because you're not going to be able to tuck that fabric into the baubles. And that will become a bit more clear in a moment. So I've got my fabric cut out. I'm going to take my first petal shape and right side up, wrong side down. I'm just going to place it over a quarter of that bauble. Now this fabric shape is much bigger than the size of the quarter of the bauble, but that's fine because we're going to trim some off. And I'm just going to roughly work out where the centre is, hold it down with my thumb and take a couple of pins which are just temporary, very temporary. So I'm not pushing them all the way in, and I'm going to just hold that fabric in place while I get started on tucking. So included in your your kit is this tool, which some of you may have seen in lampshade making kits for finishing off. You could use an old credit card or something just really firm and quite slim that enables you to push quite firmly with the fabric into the polystyrene. And I'm going to start by tucking a bit either side in the centre. That enables us to have a much more even finish. It kind of prevents the puckering and tucking that you might get. So I'm going to find where that groove is to get started. I'm going to get into the groove, as they say, and I'm pushing quite firmly a little bit on either side. You can see that's already puckered up a bit. So smoothing it out with my hand, and I'm just pushing that fabric in either side. And in fact, you can release those pins already because they will distort the fabric slightly. And if you think it isn't quite in the right place, you can just pull it out. It's a little bit tucked in. So I'm now going to smooth that with my fingers as I go, and I'm being quite firm, tucking that fabric into the cuts that I've already made in the bauble. So I'm going to work a little bit on one side, a little bit on the other side. Trying to keep it fairly smooth. You don't need to worry too much because everything that's happening on these cut edges we're going to be covering up with some ribbon, which is great. So I'm just pushing that in. Hopefully you can see that, using the end of my tool. And if you are using one of these tools and they get a bit bendy, you can just cut it off with your scissors and make a new point. So I'm nearly all the way around. Now you won't get all of this piece of fabric in, you're going to have excess, and we're going to trim it off in a minute, give it a haircut and get rid of the excess fabric. So, and if you get to a bit where you can't feel the cut, you can always just peel the fabric back and cut it a little bit deeper. So there we go. I have tucked the fabric into those cuts that I made. I'm going to take my scissors and cut off most of that excess. So you probably worked out by now that when you're doing the piece next to it, it's going to push in on top. So we don't want lots of excess trying to bunch up into that hole because it's not going to go into the cut. So I am just cutting these bits off. I'm going to cut my finger. I don't want to be bleeding on a tutorial. There we go. And just cut a bit more off there, so it's raggedy. And just going to pick that tool up again and keep pushing the rest of that fabric in. Now it doesn't have to be 100% perfect because I say we're going to put another piece of fabric over that, and then ultimately we're going to cover those seams up with the ribbon and beads. Okay, so I've nearly gone all the way around. There we go. Stray little strand there. Okay, so hopefully you can see that I've done 1/4 there of the bauble. So I'm just going to flip it over and I'm going to use the second piece of that same fabric and do the one opposite. So again, I'm just anchoring that down with my thumb. I'm taking a couple of pins and I am, show it's in the middle, just temporarily holding that fabric in place. If you're feeling bold and you don't want to pin it, that's fine. You can just get going, but I just find it easier to have something holding it. And I'm just doing a little tuck at one side with my tool and one on the other side. There we go. Just to get it going. And I am going to pop those pins out. As I say, if you leave them in, it kind of distorts the fabric because you're pulling one bit against the other. So I'm being quite firm and I am, again, pushing that fabric into the slots quite firmly. So if you were using a silkier fabric here, you just find it's got a little bit more of a handle. It moves a little bit more, so you just maybe have to keep it anchored down a bit longer and keep your thumb on it to try and keep it in the center. But you can use silky fabrics you still need to be pretty firm with pushing it into the edges here. As you can see, I've done a bit one side, a bit the other. And again, if it's not quite in the right place, you can just lift it up, smooth it out. A little bit there that doesn't feel like it's cut very well. I'm just going to pop that, put my knife back in. There we go. So if you get to any bits like that, just give it another cut. That's better. Just where I haven't quite got the angle. So I'm nearly in with my second piece of fabric. This lovely holly pattern with a bit of gold on it, and I've picked a few gold beads out just to enhance that colour. And you can add as many beads, sequins, etc. as you wish. You might want to hang a charm off the bottom, you might want to hang a tassel off the bottom, entirely up to you. You can make these as fancy and lavish and luxurious as you want. All those little seed beads you've been saving up that you weren't quite sure what for, these are perfect for these. So just taking my scissors again, and I am giving it another haircut. Just trimming off that excess. Trimming it quite close to the bauble because I've got a good amount tucked in, so it's not going to pop out. Just make sure you've got enough in there so that it doesn't pop back out again. Okay. Taking my tool again, so I'm using the smooth edge of the tool, and I'm just getting rid of those extra edges. Again, does not have to be perfect. You can see the edge of a little bit of the edge of the fabric. That's absolutely fine. Okay, nearly there. And then that'll be my two sections of my bauble done. So you can see how quick and easy this is. And if you make a few at a time, you can get a real production line going. And just adding all your fabrics. And I think they're really super gifts as well. If you put them in a nice little gift box with some shredded paper or some straw, they just look really, really lovely. And hopefully you've got sort of friends who appreciate handmade gifts. There we are. So I have got two pieces done, and now I'm just going to sweep those bits away, and I'm going to repeat the process with the other fabric. So making sure I've got the right side, lovely gold holly fabric. I'm popping my pins in. So as I say, you just want to lightly push these in. We don't want to push them in firmly because we want to whip them straight back out again in a moment. Get those sides going. Now obviously this is pushing down on top of the fabric that we've already popped in, and this is why you don't want to use a really thick fabric, because if you've got a couple of layers going in here, you'd have to dig down so hard that you'd probably split the bauble. Just taking my pins out and continuing to give that a good shove into that cut. And it will go in. I know it seems odd that you can get two layers of fabric just into that single cut on the bauble, but honestly it will go in, it's fine. There we go. So I'm just trying to speed that up slightly. So you've seen this bit already. Being a bit more gung-ho with this piece. Just make sure those ends are in at the middle. When you trim it, just try and really push those centre bits down so you don't get a bunchy bit sticking out. And if you get little tucks and tiny pleats, don't worry too much, because the ribbon is going to go around and over most of that. So I've just got one little bit left to do here before I give it a haircut. There we go. So again, I'm trimming off pretty close to the bauble, getting rid of that excess that I don't want. That's slightly wonkier, but that's fine, it's all in. So you just want to make sure that it's really well tucked in and nothing's going to pop out. and unravel and destroy your beautiful bauble. So I'm just giving a good old shove. And pushing that middle piece in. There we go. It's a bit like a peach, doesn't it? Okay, so we've got the edges of that disappearing now into those cuts. And just those tiny bit of edges showing there absolutely fine. We're going to cover those up. So it's a very forgiving project. All right, so we are on to the final one. So right side up, pop it in the centre, and make sure it is central. Oh, just catapult my pins all over the table. And again, starting in the centre, tuck a little bit in, either side. Those pins out. Just pull that out that side. So you do need to make sure it's quite firmly in. This one doesn't want to play, does it? Pinging out all over the place. There we go. Pins out. I think it's because I'm trying to just speed this bit up for you. So we get on to the decorating, which is what's coming next. And we've just used a nice metallic Christmassy ribbon here, but you can use anything. And you want your ribbon to be around about 1 centimetre wide. That's ample to cover up the seam. Any less and you can really sort of see the tucks anymore, and it doesn't sit very flat on the bauble, so it sort of sticks out as it goes around the curve. So about 1 centimetre is right. And in our kit packs we've got this in silver and gold. Lovely Christmassy ribbon. And of course you don't have to just make these for Christmas. You can make them out of all sorts of fabric. As say the gift embellishment idea. I just think they look really lovely, and you can use them on wreaths, you can use them on Easter wreaths as well as Christmas. And because they're so lightweight, you can add quite a few to a wreath, which is great. Obviously they wouldn't go outside being polystyrene, but get them wired up onto a willow or a wire wreath. And I just think they'd look really super with lots of ribbon and greenery. And you can certainly customise your colour theme using these. Use some nice metallics. I've got a lovely gold and metallic fabric waiting in my craft room, which I think might have to be a few baubles this year for gift bags for the lucky few. So I am on my last bit. I've just given it a trim, and I'm just making sure those edges are nicely firmly tucked into the edge of the bauble. Okay, they're just disappearing. And we're on the final bit. Now I have slightly cut that a little bit too much there in my haste, but there we go. Just folded it over, and we're going to hide all of that with our lovely ribbon and beads. Get rid of that last little centre bit. Okay, and there we are. So I'm just going to clear the decks of bits of rubbish. And excuse me while I blow my nose. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is add the ribbon. Now we have given you in the kit 1 metre of this metallic ribbon, and that's about right, but that gives you plenty for extra embellishments. To make loops and to make it really fancy. So you can do it with slightly less, but that's about right to add all the design that I'm going to show you here. So I'm just going to secure that ribbon in the centre at the top with a pin. And this pin's going to stay in, so you can push it all the way in. So I'm going into the centre. Sometimes you just have to reposition slightly if you get a tough bit of polystyrene. And I'm going to now take that around the seams of my bauble. And again, I'm just going to add some temporary pins in the centre of those seams, so you can leave them sticking out because they're going to come out in a moment. And I'm going to come around to the bottom, and I'm actually going to add a pin that I'm pushing in. So this pin is staying in, just to anchor it down. And taking that around, all around the bauble, and I'm picking up a pin, just a temporary placement, so those side pins are just sticking out for the moment. And I'm taking it back up to the top, and I'm going to put another pin in that's staying in, so I'm pushing it all the way down. There we go. So I've gone all the way around one way. So I've anchored that again at the top, and now I'm just going to fold that ribbon over and take it back round the other way. So I'm actually going to put another pin where I fold it, just to keep it down. Again, that can stay in, all of these will disappear, and the more you've got it anchored at the top, the better, so that when you create your hanging loop, nothing pulls out. Popping it around the side and putting a temporary pin in to hold it, so same as the other sides, round across the bottom, and I'm putting a permanent pin in, push it all the way. And this is where you could hang off a tassel or a charm or something on the bottom. You can wrap it around that pin. Putting another temporary pin at the side. Actually, that's quite a thick one. I'm going to keep it the same as the others because I want to use these later to add my beads. So these are going to go back into the bauble. There we go. And now I'm all the way back up to the top. So I'm going to take one more pin, and I'm just going to secure that ribbon right here at the top. And it's another pin that I'm going to leave in. So I'm popping that in. As you can see, you can hardly see these pins in at all, especially on the silver. Now I'm going to take the rest of that ribbon, and I'm going to make some pretty loops. So I'm going to take it around, and all these pins that I'm adding in now are staying in. So it doesn't matter how many you put in, and you've got plenty in the kits. Push that down. Take it back over, push that down, and you might feel confident enough just to hold that down with your thumb or something, and then just add one pin when you've done several loops. But I'm just being extra cautious. There we go. You can do a double one there. As you can see, I've just done a double loop, and I'm going to pop the pin in to hold it down. And now I'm ready to create my hanging loop. So I've got a good length left, and I'm going to just turn it over on itself like so, and pin it back onto itself. So I've just cut it, and I've cut the end of the ribbon here. Hopefully you can see at 45 degrees so that it just sits nicely in the middle. And I'm just going to leave that final pin slightly sticking out. Or actually, no, I'm going to push that one in just because I've created so many loops. I will add the beads with another pin later. Okay, so I have now got something that looks like a Christmas bauble. So I've got all my pretty loops at the top, and I've got my temporary pins sticking out at the side. So the next thing I'm going to do is get my beads, and I've got some seed beads together here, which are, that's what comes in our bauble kit. And I've just picked a few white and gold. This is quite a busy pattern, so you won't see them as much as you would on maybe a plain fabric. And you can use sequins, really, you know, sticky out beads, but you just need to have something that's not going to go over the top of the pin, so something that's smaller than the head of the pin. So I'm going to take these temporary pins out. I'm going to add my beads, and I'm going to add two. So I'm adding a gold and a white to my pin, and then I'm popping it back in. And this time I'm going to push it all the way down at the side. So here I've got my beads sitting on my pin. I'm going to do the same on all four sides. So I'm adding a gold and a white. Slightly tricky to pick up, but if you just pick them up on the end of the pin, you should be fine. And I'll try and get it as straight as possible. There we go. And going on to my third side, gold and a white seed bead. There we go. So obviously these pins and beads are now securing that ribbon in place at the side, so it's a decorative way to attach your ribbon. And that's my fourth one going in. I'm not sure if they're all straight, but that will be fine. And then I might want to embellish it further with some more beads and sequins. So you just keep adding them in the same way. So we're just adding beads onto pins and you're just popping them in. So I'm going to just do a couple the other way around. I'm going to do white first and then gold. Say being quite a busy pattern, you won't necessarily see it so much. And I'll just pop a couple into that panel. I've used all my whites actually, so I'm going to use a clear and a gold. And I'm just going to pop that in there. And you can see it just adds a nice bit of interest. And when this is hanging on your Christmas tree and the fairy lights are behind it, it's really going to sparkle and just pick up these little crystally beads and make it look extra pretty. I'm adding a crystally one. I can pick them up. This is why I've had to take my glasses off, because if I've got my glasses on now, I'll be peering underneath it, trying to see the beads. There we go. And do the same on the other red side. So I'm pushing that pin all the way in with the beads. And my final one, pink, she says, it's pink, clear crystal one and a gold bead, and popping that in down there. So hopefully you can see that we have got this lovely Lavish bauble with lots of sparkle on and obviously Christmas fabric, and looks really, really super. And as you've seen, so simple to make and great for gifts. And if you hang a few on your tree or give them in a gift box, as I was saying earlier, they just look absolutely beautiful and really special. And just saying again, if you want to make a memory bauble and use some fabrics that might mean something special to you or the recipient, it's a really lovely personal gift.